The mistake that most people are making with AI is not picking the wrong tool. It's chasing the shiny new tools instead of focusing on solving a specific problem in a way that builds architecture to keep your solutions and what you've created up to date across eras of AI. So let me show you what I mean. By the end of this, you'll understand how to think about AI integration within your business, what it means to build an architecture that's your own, and understand the shape of business through the AI era. And so history repeats itself, right? Patterns stay the same. And to help you understand what's currently happening in AI, I'm going to tell you the story of factories adopting electricity in the early 1900s. So imagine one organization that makes pens. You've got three factories. Within those three factories, a single steam engine runs the conveyor belts they use to make things. One engine powers one belt, creates one part. You need three parts for a pen: the tip, the cartridge, and the ink, and then they go somewhere else to be assembled. Now, all of a sudden, as an organization, you've produced one pen across the three factories. Then electric motors showed up. Within each factory, there could be three individual electric belts. Each factory could produce all of the things it needed: the tip, the cartridge, the ink. And so three factories essentially collapsed into one because a technological constraint had been lifted. Working pens now leave each factory. The owners that adopted it flourished. They gutted and reworked their factories from the beginning to adjust for the new tech and more than 3x their output. Not just because each factory was leveraged at a much higher rate per square foot, but because the handoff friction was reduced. There was no waiting for cartridges while nibs and inks are in short supply. There's no stocking stress across the three factories, no delivery delays across the three steam-powered factories, and miscommunications across these factories. Each factory has all the information and the context that it needs. How much of X, Y, and Z is being produced, and it's all communicated and decided on within each factory. So now here we are with an abundance of pens. But as we know, as business owners, producing a profit is just step one. And now comes all of the steps between having a product and producing a profit. So this breaks down into three primary categories. The first is the creative, which breaks into strategy, production, and marketing. The second is the delivery, which would include conversion, execution of actual delivered goods and completed services, and retaining those clients. And then finally, the architecture in place that captures and manages data, the operations like P&Ls and invoices, and the reporting that comes as a part of that. The thing is, the branches inherently overlap, but the information management requires division. Strategy needs to talk to operations, needs to talk to reporting, needs to talk to production. Production needs to talk to the execution team. They're all talking to sales and marketing, who's working to actually convert clients. And they're all overlapping functions of the same common goal: to solve a problem for a client and to make a profit. And so in an imaginary ideal world, there's a single person that would have the mental bandwidth, the time and energy to handle all of this because they're all part of the same operation, the same shape, the same goal. Execution would be seamless, deliverables would be perfect, sales would be easy because the person who built the strategy behind the offer is the person doing the sales that produced the marketing piece that pushed the prospect to book, and after a deal closes, it's the same person executing the solution that they pitched. And they all know exactly what this means for the business because they know how much the job costs to deliver, the margin, and the capacity of time restraints that it eats. So there's total conviction in every close, every sale, because they understand every layer of what they're selling. But this is obviously not possible. There's no one person alive that can do all of that alone, at least not if they actually want to maximize the profit of their company or get any sleep. So back to the factories. How do they handle this? They make a team, right? The creative section has a chief marketing officer, the delivery has a chief operations officer, and architecture has a chief finance officer. All of them report up to the CEO. The pattern is repeated itself. At one point with the factories, the goal was to produce pens, and constraints force that to be done across three factories. Now, at a higher level, the goal is to solve a problem and make a profit, and a different set of constraints require that they divide up these necessary parts, the creative delivery and architecture, into individual branches. Not because it's actually what's truly most ideal, or because it is the core shape of solving a problem and creating a profit, but it has to be divided up due to the constraints of the people and the tech available. And then this guy, the CEO, is essentially just filling the role that this guy was trying to fill in the best way possible with the context he's delivered from these different branches. But communication still has to happen. Marketing still has to know what we're executing. Production still has to know what's in budget from ops and reporting. And strategy comes from connecting the dots across everything to work on the business instead of inside of these different branches. I'm going to pause this story for a moment to introduce a concept that's absolutely going to be fundamental in your AI usage and business success in the coming years. And that idea is context. Context is the background information surrounding an event, statement, or idea that allows it to be understood. Essentially, all of the necessary information that we need to understand around a thing or something happening to actually understand what it is, what it means, and why it's happening the way that it is. So, what does that mean in AI usage? Each session or fresh conversation has a limited amount of context that it can handle. So when you open a fresh session, it looks something like this, where some is used by the model's training itself, but the majority of it is open. The same way that a single person couldn't handle all of the divisions of a large business because there's too much information or too much context, the AI gets overloaded with too much. It struggles connecting dots across convoluted information, the wrong context at the wrong time, and output quality decreases. And that's when you end up with what we call an AI chat hallucinating, or what's known in the AI space as context rot. So back to the pen business. What happens when one division becomes too big for one person to hold? Well, each division hits the same wall that the single operator did. So they bring on more people, form a team. Marketing brings on more people, ops brings on more people, finances brings on more people. It's the same problem, one layer down, the pattern repeats itself. And here's the thing, you have the systems, right? Marketing is in HubSpot, ops is in ClickUp, finance is in QuickBooks, and sales is in whatever CRM you're using after the most recent update and switch. The CRM might know what the prospect said if the sales rep actually recorded it, assuming the sales rep even understands how to use that software in the first place. The project tools know what got committed, QuickBooks knows what got billed, but none of them know about the connection between the three or the why behind any of it or what that means for the business. Because the why lives somewhere else, right? It's in side conversations in Slack, it's in email threads that a couple of people on, or in the head of the business owner. The decisions that actually change the work that happens here, and they rarely make it back to these systems. So every report that you read is part data from one of these systems, part reconstruction from whoever was closest to the work, and on the way up, every layer softens it because nobody wants to be the one telling the person above them that the project had a major mistake or that the deal is being dropped or whatever it is. So there's context rot within divisions. And so if you're a 10-person shop, the chain is essentially one link long. It's just you. Every cross-functional question has to be routed through that one person because you're the only one whose role is to actually read across these systems and fill in the gap with the limited information and context that's actually available to you. Underneath, it's still all one operation, one shape, one goal to solve a problem and make a profit that's split across these teams and branches by necessity. And so back in the 1920s, factory owners faced a choice. You either embrace the electric motors and completely redesign the floor of the factory around this new technological development, or you bolt an electric motor into the same floor that's designed around a constraint that no longer exists. The companies that realized the existing mental model of how an operation should run no longer applied. They redesigned their factory floors and more than 3x output to grow to levels higher than previously thought possible. The ones that bolted the new tech into the old mental model of how things should run got left in the dust. Even brand new competitors operating under the new mental model blew them out of the water. And the same pattern is repeating itself now. The divisions that you have, the subdivisions underneath, the tools holding fragments of the data, the why and what living in Slack and email or your head as the main operator, the whole shape exists because of the same kind of constraint that the pen factories had. A single human can't hold all of the context of a business at once, and the software that we had before AI really couldn't either, or at least couldn't connect the dots across it. Every tool was built to hold a slice of the operation and hand it off to the next person or to the next software. But now that constraint is being lifted by AI. And so you, as a business owner, have the same choice that a factory owner had. Either look at the shape of your current business and apply AI as tools that are bolted into the old mental model of how a business should run, and every new tool just becomes another slice of the business that people and software have to hand off between, while you're still the one trying to stitch everything together. And then the next new Claude feature or vector database that ships changes nothing because the floor itself has not changed. Or you update the mental model and you build the architecture that holds the shape of the business itself. It's separate from any tool individually, and once that exists, the AI works through it. Every new tool or new model that ships plugs into this same framework and architecture that you own. And the role at the top changes shape. The architecture starts doing the cross division reporting that you used to have to rely on other people to do. Every division, every subdivision, every tool is clearly legible and visible to the layer above immediately in real time at any time by a specific request. And so the leverage of everybody's job actually moves up. You're more focused on setting this shape, creating clear goals to execute on, rather than everybody just trying to hold the gaps together across miscommunications and fractured organization systems. It's the same choice that the factory owners had repeating itself. But Ian, you just told us that AI experiences context rot too. So how does this not become the same problem again, just with different tools? Well, great question. And if you're getting AI content on your feed, you've probably seen some viral short form content with a hook like, I just gave Claude a brain. And there's currently three ways to think of AI memory management or context management. And to understand them, first you have to understand how an AI session works and why prompt engineering is quickly going to be a thing of the past. So let's say you start a fresh ChatGPT or Claude session to help you with your marketing. That's like hiring a marketing consultant, and then as soon as the consultant walks through the door, you ask, well, what should I change in my marketing without giving him the necessary information and context? And with no understanding of what your business does, what you're currently doing to market it, the consultant can only give generalized marketing advice. And it's probably all relatively useless things that you've heard before, right? No context equals no specific meaningful advice for your scenario. A fresh AI session is exactly the same way. No context equals no specific advice. No specific advice means people try it one time, ask it one question, what should I do? What should I do better in my marketing? What should I change? And then get a generic response and thinks it's useless, going back to their old mental models and their old tools. So, how do we solve this problem? One, at the start of a fresh session, you give it all of the context that it needs in the first message. And that's what prompt engineers are trying to do. But it's time consuming and it's sloppy because the AI cannot connect dots that a human doesn't see because the human wouldn't think to include it in the context of a prompt. So what we need is a memory, right? The brain for your AI to remember things across sessions. And there's currently three ways of doing that. The first bet is essentially the open brain or the idea of a vector model. This is the most popular option right now. And it's really what you get as a deliverable from most AI memory startups, right? It takes all of the docs that you've given it, it breaks them down into long strands of numbers that hold consistent patterns. It then uses the patterns in those numbers to find similar patterns. So when you query the database, it's like, okay, what patterns are similar to this? Right? And so it works. Don't get me wrong, there are some great systems built with it, but you as an employee or as a business owner, you can't read it. Right? The brain of your business is a wall of numbers that only the AI can interpret. You can't open a file and check what it knows, and you can't correct it. Right? You're blind to what's actually in there. You're renting the brain of your business from another vendor, and on top of that, you pay to embed every doc, you pay to store it over the long term, and you pay for the management layer that sits on top. The second bet is what they call a LLM wiki. This is made by a guy named Kaparthi. Again, can be a great system, but there are pros and cons. It's like Wikipedia, but written by AI. And this is how things like a Hermes agent runs. Every time something changes, your main AI executes the change, and then a secondary AI rewrites the linked wiki page to capture that change. So the brain stays legible. If you want to wait for the second AI to write it down, you can read it the way you would read a Wikipedia article. But there's the cost because you need to run a second AI constantly to manage the wiki, and the wiki only stays useful as long as that second agent is tending it. Along with that, if you want to see what's actually being done, you do have to wait for that second agent to make the update. And the instant the librarian stops, the brain rots. So you're committing to a perpetual second agent that only exists to keep the first one's memory readable, legible, right? And finally, the third and the least exciting option, in my opinion, the best, position addressed memory. It's not a new system, it's just a new way of operating within the files that are already on your computer. And so all three work, but position is the cheapest, the fastest, and it's the only one that a human can actually read and edit in real time. So when I open a file, I'm positioned in it, right? From this file, I can open the files downstream from it. It's one folder with files inside of it. And from this, that initial file directs Claude where to go. So for example, if you wanted to open up Claude and immediately work on the offer that you're currently creating, you would just root it right here. The file routes Claude to know where to go next. For the offer, read this. For the intake SOPs, read this. For execution, read this. The position itself is the routing and the direction. The path itself is the meaning and takes it to where it needs to go with all the necessary context already preloaded. Claude just walks to where the work lives, reads the file, does the work within the file, and as it's doing it, writes that work in a way where you can actively see and edit it alongside the model you're working with. And so take this video that you're watching right now as an example. To write it, I needed to know who I'm talking to, the structure and the pace of the video, what the actual message is, what style do I want the visuals to be, the structure that I'm working in, my context for this individual project. All of the logistics are in my folders, and all the ideas of what I actually want to execute are in my head. My ideal client profile came from research that I did weeks ago. The brand identity colors are things I already decided on, and the idea comes from a synthesis doc that I built last week. And so when I sit down to draft this video, I didn't have to re-explain any of it to Claude. Claude opened up the top file, routed to where he needed, and did the work that I wanted him to do. And then I spent hours re-editing the script, adjusting the videos, thinking through the analogies and metaphor, and really I'm not any less busy than I would be without the AI, but where I'm busy is different. It's less time making the visuals, and my time is much higher leverage, and my vision is amplified because I'm not trying to go back in and re-identify my style or reconnect what the ideal client profile is every time. Because if I'm missing that context in my head, which is already an amazing context machine, by the way, then I just route it back to where Claude has the context saved and it's ready for me there, easy, 24/7, cheaply, and mine forever. And so that doesn't disappear when the session ends. The next video gets made faster, right? The next sales page is designed with the same brand identity. The next client gets onboarded through the exact same process as the last. There's no friction, there's no miscommunication, there's no context rot because it's all here locally in my brain and in my computer on my files. Forever, for free, and available to any AI model. So today it's Claude, tomorrow it's whatever's better. The folder doesn't care. The routing system still works with any model. The folder is mine. I'm just directing the AI to use it how I want it to use it. And so think about what this means for our context rot question. AI context rot lives within each session, each new conversation. This whole framework lives outside of the session with the AI. The whole shape of my business sits on my computer intact, available to use, access, and read with or without AI's help at any time. Claude only ever holds the slice of exactly what it's working on right now. If it needs to connect dots across the divisions, or what used to be divisions, it can immediately, in real time, access that information. Remember the three pillars from earlier, the creative, the delivery, the architecture. Most businesses, most owners treat these as three separate problems, three teams, three individual software stacks that come with three individual monthly bills. But it's all part of the same shape divided up by the old technological restraints. And so if we look back at the folder, the brand voice file, the ideal client profile, the visual style would have been the creative pillar, but now it all lives inside this one folder. The template that I use when the next client lands, the workflow that runs delivery is the delivery pillar, but it's all within the architecture itself. One thing, one file, one folder that I own. I'm not renting it. I'm not paying another software to host my data. I own it and it's mine forever. The constraint that forced them apart is gone. It's all three pillars within one folder on my computer. And it doesn't just stop at this scale. The project folder sits inside a team folder, inheriting the team's context through the cascade that we just walked. And the team folder sits inside a division folder, inheriting from that in the exact same way. Three levels deep into it, and it's the exact same shape. And that division folder sits within the company folder itself. Marketing, operations, reporting, every function in the business is a branch of the same folder, the same architecture. And what I think most people are missing when it comes to integrating AI is that the folder, the software, is no longer just a tool the business uses. The folder itself is the business, the shape of the operation in physical form sitting locally on your computer. The mechanism that fixed context wrought at a project scale is doing the exact same job at a team scale and the same job at a division scale because it's literally the exact same mechanism, one level up. And context rot happens when context handoff and context scatter happens. But when the folder is where the work lives at every scale, all of the context you could possibly need for any function and any question that you need answered is available immediately at any time. And so that's the core shape of how businesses are going to be running in the new reworked factory floor. The folder itself is the business. It's the same shape at every scale, and every pillar is held within one folder, one combined architecture. And so once you see it like this, you stop solving every problem from scratch and you start building the shape to handle these issues. And it just works its way upward, and the architecture keeps building upon itself. This is what I like to call an AI operator workspace using an interpretable context methodology, or ICM. If you haven't heard of him, Jake Van Cleef came up with this term. Check out his school community and his context. 10 out of 10 would recommend for anybody. But you build it once and you own it forever, right? The new factory floor. And the thing is that the shape of the business isn't actually changing, right? It's always been the same. The one goal, solve a problem, make a profit. The forced division of work into these separate individual branches is what I think is really going to change, at least for the businesses that want to thrive. And the entry point to doing this and implementing it depends on where you're at right now. If you've got an existing business, you build into the new shape from the bottom up. Pick a current bottleneck within a current division that's bleeding the loudest, leaking money and leaking time. Fix that one issue in a way that allows the architecture to start building underneath and connecting the dots across your operation. The thing is that new businesses are going to start at the top. One root file naming the goal and shape of the operation, and the folder branches develop downward from there. One thing in general, never build something that you don't need. Every folder in this business is only going to apply or appear to one specific problem, one specific bottleneck, and one specific thing that can be streamlined within the company. There's literally no dead weight. Every file gets purpose-built the moment it's needed, shaped to the exact job and the exact role that it's filling. It's the same architecture either way, just starting at a different point. That's a huge part of this, is that the shape scales, but you build it one piece at a time. So start by automating whatever is wasting the most of your time right now. Whether or not you're just a person or a business owner, look through your day-to-day routine and life and ask yourself, okay, what's actually causing friction, right? Where does friction live in my business and my life? Every cross-division question is routing through you. So if you're gone a few days and the business stalls, that's absolutely an architecture issue. If a client report that takes 10 hours gets rebuilt from scratch every time, if deals are dying because somebody forgot to follow up, or the phone rings and nobody picks it up, if you're paying for a ton of different softwares that you're constantly bouncing back and forth between and barely using, pick one problem that's taking up the most of your time, build a solution within that folder with the context that you need to give it to handle that for you. And that's your first step towards actually staying ahead of the game in the AI era in a way that's not going to make you beholden to these huge companies and these huge corporations. You own the file structure, you own and control your own context and your own business. And because the same shape repeats at every scale, this is where the architecture actually starts working for you. The solution that you laid out at a project level, right, to clear a bottleneck or help create visuals much faster will make the next drain on your time or energy a lot easier to see. Because now if reporting has gone from 10 hours a week down to an hour a week, you'll start figuring out what else is actually draining your company's time and money, and then you build a specific purpose-built solution to clear that bottleneck, and so on and so forth. And so if you solve the architecture shape one time, the way the folders work and function, then you can apply that fix across a wider and wider scope within your business. And part of the reason that I get so excited about this and why I think it's so important that we start doing this now is because what you're working on, every step that you build that saves your time or makes you more money is architecture that you own. Any model runs on top of it. If Claude decides to raise their prices tomorrow, you still have your files and you're not dependent on them. If Claude does something that you don't like and you don't want to support the business anymore, if everybody owns their architecture like this, then we can all transition away from being dependent on these huge companies. At a certain point, we'll even be able to use local AI models within our own locally hosted folder system, and then you're not beholden to any software or tech company at all. And as soon as a better model ships, next week, whether it's from Claude to OpenAI or a local model, you just swap it and keep going, running within the same system on the same files locally. The folder is yours, the folder stays. You and you alone own the core structure of your business. So if you feel like you want to learn more about possibly working with me to build these systems or building them and implementing AI like this in your own business, join my free school community to start the process of learning how to actually do this. The link is going to be in the description of this video.